There are moments in a baseball season that stop everything. Moments where the noise of a pennant race, the chatter of trade rumors, and the daily rhythm of wins and losses all fade into the background, replaced by something rawer, something more urgent, something that reminds every person inside this sport that beneath the statistics and the strategy, there are human beings making decisions that will define careers, reshape rosters, and alter the course of an entire franchise. This is one of those moments. And for the Los Angeles Dodgers, it may be the most defining moment of their entire season. The announcement came without warning. No leaks. No whispers from inside sources. No beat reporters hinting at what was coming the night before. Just a cold, official statement released through the Dodgers organizational channels on a Wednesday morning that hit the baseball world like a sledgehammer through glass. Manager Dave Roberts, the man who has guided this franchise through championship runs and heartbreaking collapses, through roster revolutions and individual brilliance, had officially announced what insiders are already calling the biggest purge of the 2025 Dodgers season. 2 players demoted. Both designated for assignment. 8 relief pitchers, not 1, not 3, not half the bullpen, all 8, completely overhauled in a single sweeping move that left players, coaches, and front office personnel staring at their phones in stunned silence. The baseball world did not walk into Wednesday morning expecting this. Nobody did. But the Dodgers have never operated on anyone else's timeline. The details of the roster moves were as jarring as the announcement itself. The 2 players designated for assignment had not been peripheral figures quietly fading at the edges of the roster. These were men with histories in this organization, men who had suited up in Dodger blue, who had heard the roar of that crowd, who had contributed in moments that mattered. To be designated for assignment is not merely a roster technicality. In the culture of a team like the Dodgers, it is a public verdict. It is the organization looking a player in the eyes and saying, clearly and without softening, that they no longer fit the vision of what this team is building. Those words, unspoken but understood by every professional athlete in that clubhouse, landed with devastating weight. But it was the bullpen overhaul that truly shook the foundation. 8 relief pitchers. Gone. Replaced. Reassigned, released, or shuffled with the kind of cold efficiency that only the most ruthless organizations in professional sports are capable of executing. One pitcher, speaking later under the condition of anonymity, described the mood in the bullpen as unlike anything he had experienced in 15 years of professional baseball. He said it felt less like a roster adjustment and more like the ground disappearing beneath their feet. Nobody saw it coming. And nobody knew how to respond. Roberts addressed the media that afternoon in a press conference that was, by any measure, one of the most tense and carefully watched of his managerial career. He entered the room with the measured composure that has become his signature, unhurried, deliberate, giving nothing away in his expression that he did not intend to give. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly into the assembled crowd of reporters without blinking. He said the decision was not made in anger. It was not made as a reaction to a single game, a single performance, or a single moment of failure. It was, he insisted, the result of a deep and honest evaluation of what this team needed to compete at the level the Dodgers demand of themselves every single day. His voice was steady. His words were precise. But those who have covered this team long enough to read the spaces between his sentences heard something else underneath the composure. Frustration. Controlled, professionalized, carefully managed, but frustration nonetheless. Because this was not the team Roberts had envisioned when the season began. And everyone in that press conference room understood exactly what he meant, even if he never said it directly. But the roster purge, as shocking as it was, quickly became the second biggest story of the day. Because within hours of the announcement, a separate and far more significant piece of news broke through official MLB channels, and this time, it was not about the players. It was about Roberts himself. Major League Baseball, following a formal review process that had apparently been underway for several weeks without public knowledge, announced that manager Dave Roberts had been officially banned from managing any Dodgers games against the Seattle Mariners for the remainder of the season. The punishment, described in the official statement as the result of conduct violations during a previous series, was immediate and non-negotiable. No appeals process was publicly outlined. No timeline for reconsideration was offered. The language of the announcement was surgical in its clarity and absolute in its finality. Dave Roberts, the man who calls every pitch sequence, who makes every lineup decision, who stands in that dugout as the living embodiment of this organization's competitive identity, would not be on that bench when the Dodgers faced Seattle. The press conference, which had already been tense, became something else entirely. Reporters leaned forward. Cameras adjusted. The room, which had been processing the roster moves with the professional detachment of people who cover this sport for a living, suddenly felt the full weight of what was unfolding. This was not a roster story anymore. This was something larger. Something institutional. Something that cut directly to the heart of the Dodgers' identity and their standing within the structure of Major League Baseball itself. Roberts, to his credit, did not flinch. He acknowledged the ruling. He accepted it publicly and without visible emotion. He said the organization would move forward and that his staff was fully capable of managing the team with the same standard of excellence the Dodgers maintain regardless of circumstances. But his jaw was tight. And his eyes, for just a moment, said everything his words refused to. And then came Rushing. If the roster purge was a thunderclap and the Roberts suspension was a lightning strike, what happened to catcher Ryan Rushing was the kind of quiet, devastating aftermath that leaves the deepest damage. MLB officials, acting on a separate and independent investigation, announced that Rushing's catching equipment had been officially confiscated. Every piece. The gear that a catcher relies upon as the most fundamental tools of his position, removed, catalogued, and taken from his possession pending the outcome of a formal review process that the league declined to detail publicly. And then came the second part of the announcement. Rushing had been permanently banned from playing the position of catcher in any official MLB game. Not suspended. Not placed on administrative leave pending review. Permanently banned. The word settled over the baseball world like a heavy fog that no wind could move. Coaches who had worked with Rushing for years stared at the announcement on their phones and read it twice, 3 times, 4 times, certain they had misread something. Teammates who had spent an entire season building chemistry with him behind the plate sat in silence, unable to find words that fit the magnitude of what had just been taken from him. Inside the Dodgers clubhouse, the reaction was not anger. It was not disbelief. It was something quieter and more unsettling than either of those things. It was grief. Because every professional athlete in that room understood, at a level that no civilian can fully access, what it means to have your position taken from you permanently. Not your roster spot. Not your contract. Your position. The thing you have practiced since childhood, the thing that defines how you move and think and compete, gone. By institutional decree. Without recourse. Rushing did not speak to the media. He did not release a statement. Those who saw him in the facility that afternoon described a man who had retreated entirely into himself, quiet in a way that was different from composure, still in a way that was different from calm. By nightfall, the story had consumed every major sports platform in America. Analysts debated the legality and the precedent of a permanent position ban. Former managers weighed in on the implications of Roberts' suspension against a specific opponent. Players across the league, speaking carefully and choosing their words with obvious awareness of institutional consequences, offered reactions that ranged from sympathy to bewilderment. And throughout all of it, the Dodgers said nothing further. No additional press conferences. No clarifying statements. No sources speaking on background to soften the edges of what had been announced. The organization, true to its nature, had made its decisions and released its statements and now stood behind the wall of its own silence, immovable, unapologetic, and entirely certain of itself. This is the reality the Dodgers now inhabit as they prepare to face the Mariners. A bullpen rebuilt from the ground up. 2 veterans erased from the roster with the stroke of an administrative pen. A manager banned from the dugout for a series that, given the current standings, carries enormous postseason implications. And a catcher permanently stripped of the only position he has ever known. The baseball questions are significant. Who manages in Roberts' absence? How does a bullpen rebuilt overnight perform under playoff pressure? How does a team absorb this much institutional disruption without losing the psychological cohesion that separates champions from contenders? But the human questions are the ones that linger long after the box scores are filed and the highlight reels are assembled. What happens to a man when the position that defined him is taken away forever? What happens to a manager when the game he has dedicated his life to tells him he cannot stand in that dugout? What happens to a team when everything it believed about its own stability is dismantled in a single Wednesday morning? The Dodgers will take the field against the Mariners. The game will be played. A winner will be decided. But nothing inside that clubhouse will feel the same. And right now, all of baseball is watching, not the scoreboard, not the pitching matchups, not the lineup cards. They are watching to see if this team, shaken to its foundation, still knows how to stand.